Hi, Giovanna.
Hi, Renske.
Hi. So I was wondering, according to you, what do you think that is important within company culture?
Well, I think the most important thing is to first define what that is, define what culture is, but especially, and it's very, very basic, you might think this is like children's play, define what the values of that culture are. And define the word value because that can mean different things in the boardroom, in the C-suite, in middle management. And then agree, okay, these are the values that we want to live through our culture. I think that's a very important step. Sometimes people forget it.
Yeah, but what is the specific meaning of value to you?
Well, there's, of course, we can take the Oxford definition, right? And it's you can narrow it down to what's good, what's bad, but it's really, what do I stand for? What is it? What is my North Star? So, and oftentimes you see, as an employee, you align yourself with the company values. You often want to look out for, you want to go to work for companies that match those values. But we're also human beings that are constantly evolving, and so are organizations. So I've seen a couple of organizations that have been around for 100 years, and not that I've been around 100 years, but the companies have been around 100 years. But their values have to evolve. It cannot, we're now looking at procurement being managed differently, stakeholders being managed differently, and we now need to make sure that those company values, that culture, is also in line with the people that we deal with inside the company and outside the company.
Yeah, because if I speak for myself, sometimes it's very hard to align my own values with the company you work for. But where does the process start? Because you were saying like the first step, it's defining, but how do you define your own values and how do you match it with the company?
Yeah. Well, again, human beings are constantly evolving, right? And we're
Yeah.
part of a system, and what is our frame of reference? Where do we get our values from as humans? Well, our parents, our family, our environment, the country that we live in. When you come into an organization, it's a mesh of everything. And
Yeah.
I know that the term systemic comes up often now. It's gaining more popularity. And so remember that everybody comes with their own systems, right? With their own family systems, with the experiences that they've done they've had in the past. So to bring it back to an organization, what you as a leader coming in to represent this company, whether it's a listed company, a private company, a family company, a four-person company, as a leader, what is it, what are the values that company, do they match to my own values? So it's really a lot of self-reflection and a lot of really understanding who you are, and that's really difficult, of course.
Yeah, that's totally. And because you are saying like companies are changing, but also I think, yeah, yourself, you are also changing.
Absolutely.
So is it like a recurrent process, like you should define your values every 5 years or
Well, it's in line with the company strategy, right?
yeah,
In the last 5 years, companies have had to redefine everything, and it was because of that black swan nobody saw coming,
yeah,
COVID,
yep,
right? We were up to 2019, companies thought, okay, we've got our strategy, etc. And suddenly companies, for example, that were brick and mortar, right? The companies that had, a lot of retail stores or had a lot of real estate, suddenly had to have people working from home. So what do you do with that? So suddenly you just, in a span of 5 years, you had to change everything. I'm not saying that we're always going to have to change because of a horrible event happening, but companies have to evolve because humanity is evolving. And so of course, the business is you have to please your customer, right? And the customer is going to look for a company who matches their values. So we translate that into the culture that we want to live in the company or in the organization.
okay. And well, then my last question, what are you doing when you find out that your own values doesn't match the company anymore?
That is a really great question, and it is the toughest question, because
Yeah.
that means you have to have a lot of courage. You have to have a courageous conversation with yourself, and courageous conversations is something that I learned at Philips when I worked at
Okay.
Philips. You know, it's you really have to know, okay, is this really conflicting with my values? Where's my North Star? I don't feel centered. And then you have to really make a decision. Do I still fit? Do my values still fit? Because you have to bring yourself completely to a transformation, to a culture shift, right? And and that's why I say it's really important to make sure that middle management also understands. Sometimes I've seen in companies I've worked at that the culture part is the hardest part to change, but it's because the two layers above get it and they want to change it and take it into that direction, but they forgot to check in on middle management and see where they are at. There are people who have been there perhaps for quite a long time, and their experience is extremely valuable, but their attitude might not be matching the values moving forward. So then that conversation needs to happen. But you as an employee, or as just as a human being, need to know, is this where I need to be? It's a really hard conversation. It's not the most popular answer, I'm sure.
No.
But that is in the best interest of yourself, but it's in the best interest of the company, because sometimes parting ways will be the best thing for both.
Sometimes you only have the courage to do it, of course.
Exactly. And of course, again, we're always evolving, but there's always that fear of change. Humans can be very reticent to change, but we have to understand that change is the only constant.
Yeah.
And so you really have to have a lot of self-reflection, and that's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, I get it. Well, thank you so much for telling us more about the importance of our values.
Thank you.
Thanks.